The first demand is that we have effective civil rights legislation, no compromise, no filibuster.
No force under the sun can block and stop this civil rights revolution which is now underway.
In this campaign, we are coming to get our check.
Hello, world. Welcome again to another episode of the All About Housing podcast. Apologies for showing on a little bit late. We had minor technical difficulties, but those have been resolved. Again, wherever you are in New Jersey, wherever you are, north, south, or central, anywhere in the United States, anywhere around the world, I am thrilled you've tuned in into tonight's program. And as always, I'm hoping we make real good use of your time. Today, we'll be having a really important conversation about the missing history behind the 1975 Southern Burlington County NAACP versus Mount Laurel Township lawsuit. For the folks who don't know, May 1st was actually the 50th anniversary of the filing of that historic case. So I'm really excited that 50 years later, we get to talk about the people behind the scenes who had the courage to organize and speak truth to power. We have three legendary guests here today. We have a surprise guest, and I'm really excited for you all to meet her. In a minute, I'll let everyone introduce themselves. I just want to share some quick updates from our last conversation. So last month, I was here with my colleagues, my comrades, Sam and James, and we had a really great conversation, a really lovely conversation about Malcolm X and healing the wound. And we're looking forward to some good news that the Fair Chance in Housing Act will be state law very soon. So we want to say thank you to all the folks who reached out to the legislators, and please continue to do so. I want to send a special shout out to Louis Maltby from the Princeton Civil Rights Commission. He reached out to us. So we really appreciate all the folks that call the legislators that are interested in pushing this legislation forward. And last April, I remember I said I was going to try to get the godfather, the OG of our work, Peter O'Connor, to come on and share some thoughts with the folks. And I'm really glad today Peter can make it. But I didn't know then that a week later I'd get to speak to Marcus and hear his vision for the next generation. So we really have two really legendary civil rights figures, but we also have one more special guest. And so it's my honor to really introduce you all to Marcus Sibley, Peter O'Connor, and Crystal Sibley. Hey. How you all doing?
Good, thank you.
Doing good. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Very happy to join you tonight.
Yes, Crystal, I'm really excited that you're here because Marcus told us that you might be able to come on, but he wasn't sure. So I'm glad you could make it.
No problem. This is a party I'm very happy to crash because it's always good seeing my dear friend Peter. I see Marcus quite frequently, but it's good to see Peter.
All right, cool. You folks know we're just here to talk about the history behind the historic lawsuit, give folks a chance to understand like the meaning behind our work. But let's just get right into it. Marcus, I'll start with you. Just let the folks know who you are, why you're here, and why you're interested in having this conversation today.
Thank you so much, Ellen. My name is Marcus Sibley. I am the president of the Southern Burlington County NAACP. I am the New Jersey State Conference NAACP Environmental and Climate Justice Chairman. I'm also the chairman of the New Jersey Progressive Equitable Energy Coalition. And I'm also the communications chair for the NAACP. I am very much invested in getting us to a better place. We've had so many of our forefathers put in the work. We had so many of my ancestors put in the work, and they've left us with these tools. And it's up to us to use the tools to get us to where we need to go. And it's up for us, more importantly, to understand that we have a responsibility to do things to further legacies. We can't rest on other people's accomplishments. We have to use other people's accomplishments and build on that. So I'm very interested in housing. My mentor is Mr. Mike McNeil. He's the owner of Steps Solutions for Ending Poverty, Steps for Ending Poverty Solutions, and he's also the housing chair for the state of New Jersey NAACP. And he's always explained to us that housing is the most important and most pressing issue when it comes down to civil rights. And he said that long before I understood it. And now I understand it. So now that he's given me this information, it's up to me to try my best to give others that information, because it is so very important. So I'm excited to be here. I'm grateful for this conversation, and absolutely grateful for people like Peter, who understood long ago how serious this was and how it needed the proper attention. So thank you guys so much.
Awesome. Marcus, I'm really excited you're here. A couple weeks ago, we had a really great conversation, and I'm looking forward to you like sharing your vision about where we can take the Mount Laurel Doctrine in the next generation. Because I think you get it. I think you understand how great this the state policy is, and picking up on the work of our ancestors. I think we can make great progress. So, Peter, I'll popcorn to you to introduce yourself to the folks. Just let them know why you're here and why you're interested in having this conversation today.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm an attorney and also a nonprofit housing developer. I'm one of the 3 attorneys that was involved bringing the original Mount Laurel case, which we filed on May 1st, 1971, with Carl Biscayne and Ken Miser. Carl was our chief counsel, who was the trial counsel. Ken and I were the backup on the legal aspects, and also did a lot of the factual research to help bring the case. I have been involved for more than 50 years. It's hard to believe, in this effort. And on the one hand, it explains to you how difficult it is to make progress on issues that are fundamentally racial and issues of equality. And it just is a long struggle to gain the support of the courts and then the support of the communities, which the case really addresses the fundamental issue of where people can live in the state of New Jersey. I started out at Legal Services in Camden when we brought this case. I then went to found Fair Share Housing Center, which is the litigation and advocacy arm of the Mount Laurel Doctrine. I was executive director for over 40 years. And then I stepped down and I had founded the Fair Share Housing Development. And we've built about 700 units, and we're now building about 350 more, primarily in Mount Laurel and Cherry Hill. So I'm actively involved. It's still a struggle, and I'll have more details as you go forward.
Cool. Peter, yeah, awesome. Thank you so much for coming on, because I know I've gotten to know you in the last year or so, and I'm just impressed by the wealth of knowledge you have about the state, the amount of great work you've done. I'm really excited for folks to really get to know and hear from you, about the history of the Mount Laurel Doctrine, but also just to get to know you more, get in touch with you and all the work you're doing and see how they can support you. So I'm really excited you're here. Our final surprise guest, Crystal Charlie Sibley. Crystal, I'll popcorn to you. Let the folks know who you are and why you're interested in having this conversation today.
Thank you so much, Elam and Peter. So I am Crystal Charlie Sibley. I am the immediate past president of the Southern Burlington County NAACP, where I served as the first woman president of the branch. And I served with pride for 6 years. And, in the course of taking on that role, I had the opportunity to learn so much from Fair Share regarding the history behind the Mount Laurel Doctrine and understanding, number one, like this nationally impacted housing, right? And as Peter just said, it's still something that you literally are fighting in 2021. And so I've been very grateful to learn the rich history of Mount Laurel, the rich history of New Jersey. It's important history. A lot of time when people think about race relations, they're very much focused on the South, or southeastern United States, South period. But New Jersey has had and still has its very own set of unique problems and demographics when it comes to race relations. And so I'm just very glad to be here to take part in this conversation. One of the things that was very mind-blowing to me when I came on as president of the branch and working with Fair Share was the fact that I was going to court still for litigation that's being fought that was brought long before I was born, right? And so that says a lot about the heart of New Jersey, right? Or the heart of some New Jersey that still wants to keep things in places that are less than equitable. So thank you for having me on and including me in this dialogue tonight.
Yeah, awesome. I mean, you guys, Southern Burlington County NAACP, you're the historic branch that started this whole thing. So, I couldn't think of any guest more perfect to have this conversation with Peter. And Peter, obviously you were one of the attorneys who brought this case forward and really got this whole thing started. So we'll just get right into it. I know a little bit about the Mount Laurel Doctrine. I got this job with Fair Share a couple of years, 2019, and I've been privileged to learn about the history. But one thing that I'm always shocked about is like a lot of folks don't know why we have amazing affordable housing opportunities in historically exclusionary suburbs in New Jersey. A lot of folks don't understand the history behind the work. So I thought it was important to have this conversation today because obviously that's got to change. There's no Netflix documentary out there about the Mount Laurel Doctrine, about Ethel Lawrence and the amazing work she did. And even in our high schools, we've not even started teaching this important civil rights history to all the folks in public school. Because I remember growing up, I went to high school in New Jersey, Franklin Township, and there was no mention of the Mount Laurel Doctrine in any of my history classes. So, obviously that work to really educate people about the importance of the work we do, the importance of the Mount Laurel Doctrine is crucial. It's crucial because if you don't have your history, then you're just wayward. So, Peter, I'll really just ask you a simple question. The lawsuit was filed in 1971. Could you just tell us, why it happened and what went into it?
Okay, sure. The key reason that the lawsuit was brought is that Ethel Lawrence, who was and her husband, Tom, they had 9 children. They lived in Mount Laurel for generations. They had worked on the farms in Mount Laurel. Prior to the 70s, most of Mount Laurel was farms, and it was just about to flip toward the suburbs. And Ethel Lawrence was concerned that her children and grandchildren would not be able to live in the community that she grew up in and lived in. And so she went to the state of New Jersey, Department of Community Affairs. She got a small housing grant to help with the planning for 36 affordable housing units. And when she went to the planning board, they turned her down on the grounds that we do not have housing zoning for multifamily housing. We only have large lot zoning, and you will have to do something else. She then ran into Reverend Stuart Woods, and Reverend Woods said, why don't we go over and meet with Camden Regional Legal Services, and our jurisdiction covered Burlington County. And we met with her and discussed her plight. And at the same time, Reverend Woods contacted the NAACP, Southern Burlington County, and asked them to be a player in this potential litigation. We also, because we had roots in the city of Camden, got the Camden County NAACP involved, along with a group of individuals and activists in the city of Camden. So there were two groups. They had two different objectives. The Mount Laurel group with Ethel Lawrence and the NAACP, they didn't want to see the residents who had been there for a long time, who were low and moderate income, be pushed out of the community. And the town was using a system of code enforcement to condemn houses. They had no relocation plans, and then the people would have to leave. They were trying to stay in and become part of an inclusionary community. The Camden people were just the opposite. They were living in segregated blight, and they wanted opportunities in the region. So the two came together, and the lawsuit was filed on May 1st, 1971. There was a trial for 4 days, and the trial resulted, ironically, on May 1st, 1972, with the first victory for the plaintiffs in the Mount Laurel litigation. And we were before Judge Edward Martino in Mount Holly, and Edward Martino ruled that Mount Laurel was guilty of a pattern and practice of economic discrimination. And that's an important distinction. We did not have to prove racial discrimination or motivation or disparate impact. We just had to show that the planning and zoning that was in place did not permit low and moderate income families to live and develop housing in the community. Judge Martino really is the father of the Mount Laurel doctrine at the trial level, and he ruled that Mount Laurel had to assess the needs of the community, how many low and moderate income families were there, how many were living in substandard housing, et cetera, come up with a report, and then come up with zoning that would address the ability to satisfy the needs of the people that were analyzed and set forth in the report. And the problem became that Mount Laurel never did that. And you have to understand that over 50 years ago, we were up against the concept of home rule, which is that each municipality is their own kingdom, and each municipality pulls up the drawbridge and can do what it wants within the community without interference from the state or the federal level. That was their theory. And they wanted to be that way so that they could plan, zone, and develop the community for only middle and upper income families and exclude low and moderate income families. The judge ordered them to come up with a plan. They did not, but they appealed. And now to just explain why it took all these years, going from the trial court decision on May 1st, 72, we didn't get the first Supreme Court case until March of 1975. And that decision was known as the Mount Laurel 1 decision, in which the court affirmed what Judge Martino did and went even further and ordered Mount Laurel to come up with a plan and address their fair share of the need for low and moderate income housing. Mount Laurel was developing at that time, and there were three major planned unit developments. If you can picture a planning board meeting to discuss over 10,000 units of housing in these three huge developments. And not one unit was for low or moderate income families. Not one unit was affordable. And the court said that because they were a developing community, they had to address the needs of the low and moderate, at least up to their fair share, which would be determined on a regional need. And so every developing community in the state, and there were many, because the state was moving from farms to suburbs at the time, and that would define developing community. And so the judge ruled in our favor, and it was a landmark breaking ground decision. Mount Laurel came back after the Supreme Court had unanimously ruled in Mount Laurel 1 and said, we are not going to implement the court's decision.
Oh, wow.
And for several years, over 150 municipal mayors would meet monthly in Mount Laurel in the municipal building and discuss ways to avoid compliance with the decision. And the thing that was really disturbing was that on the walls of the municipal building we're talking now, there were many racial cartoons about derogatory pictures of blacks moving in, all kinds of things which might be inappropriate to describe right now, but you get the idea. And they were trying to play the racial card, even though the decision was based on economic discrimination. And so they then rezoned three properties. One was totally wetlands. One could not be developed for other reasons, environmental. And the third was where the plan would be for the Patco speed line to come past the Morristown Mall, and it was inappropriate. We had a 42-day trial challenging those zoning locations as being contrary to Mount Laurel 1. And at the end of that case, the local judge in Mount Laurel ruled that the Mount Laurel Planning Board and Township had complied and taken reasonable steps to implement the Mount Laurel 1 decision, even though not one unit could have ever been developed. We're now up to 1978. So we've gone 3 years from Mount Laurel 1 with no compliance. We're now 78. We appeal that decision, and that leads to Mount Laurel 2 in 1983. Again, another 5 years. And now the Mount Laurel doctrine is comprised of the 75 decision Supreme Court Mount Laurel 1 and the 83 decision Supreme Court Mount Laurel 2. This Mount Laurel 2 decision expanded the definition of who had to comply to all municipalities, not just developing communities, and ordered regional fair share plans to be developed and implemented at the local level. And they also put in a provision, the Supreme Court, that if the towns did not comply, And there was a private developer or nonprofit developer who wanted to implement part of the town's fair share, that they could go to court and get a builder's remedy permit from the court and avoid going to the town, the planning board, or the zoning board. The proof had to be that the town was refusing to implement their fair share. And if they failed to implement their fair share, it opened the door to the builder's remedy. That led in '83, the towns began to then get the picture that the courts were serious and they had put in the teeth to implement regardless of what the town did. And so the next step was for the town politically, with Governor Tom Kean, to create the Fair Housing Act in 1985. And prior to implementing and passing that legislation, Governor Kean was interviewed and made the statement that he felt the Mount Laurel decision was a communist type of action by the courts and was contrary to home rule and contrary to the best of New Jersey. So they had to implement something in order to take back some control. And so the legislature passed it. The provision that was the hooker in there was that they went to people in Newark and said, do you know what this legislation in Mount Laurel 1 and 2 means for your community? And the state senator at the time said, what does it mean? It means that you will get no money to develop anything in Newark. Now, we have a way around that. These are the suburban people who are under the gun to implement Mount Laurel, and they come up with the 50% concept, which is known as the Regional Contribution Agreement provision. They put that in the Fair Housing Act, and what it said was basically that a suburban community could write a check to an urban community. They didn't use suburban and urban, they used a willing and receiving community. Well, no suburb was going to take a town's fair share, so only was the urban areas. And initially it started with $25,000 a unit. It went up to $35,000. And if you wrote a check, you could write a check for half of your fair share obligation and pass it on to an urban community. There were 123 of these RCA, Regional Contribution Agreements, implemented, and it undermined the Mount Laurel doctrine because the towns then would do their other 50%, with half of it being senior housing, and then they would delay the implementation of the other 25% for families. So every step of the way, there was municipal opposition, and being one who was a witness to this over all these years, that opposition was based on racial discrimination, pure and simple, even though the doctrine is couched in the terminology of economic discrimination for liability purposes. And so we're now past the 1985, the Fair Housing Act, but there's this escape clause, and it took us until 2008 to have Governor Corzine come to the Ethel Lawrence project and sign legislation, which we succeeded by one vote in overturning and eliminating regional contribution agreements. And so now we've just summarized from 1970, when Ethel Lawrence and Reverend Woods came to us, 1970 up to 2008, before there's a real true picture of implementing the doctrine. And at that point, the Fair Share Housing Center has carried the ball back to the Supreme Court several times, always successful. And the doctrine is very simple. It means that when a municipality acts on behalf of the state in carrying out zoning and planning, it must do that on behalf of all four segments of society: low, moderate, middle, and upper. And now the cases are ironclad. And as you know, over 335 municipalities have now signed with court approval, trial court approval, agreements to do their fair share, a real fair share number, which will produce probably in the neighborhood of 125,000 to 150,000 affordable units. And that is on top of about 50,000 or so that were produced prior to the decisions of the court in 2015. So this has been a long effort, and it has been one that is very joyful in the sense that it really depends on your zip code about your future. And if you're in a place that has the resources and has the good schools and jobs and fresh air and etc., you have a much better chance than if you're in a segregated community. And in New Jersey is the 5th most segregated school systems in the United States. And so there's a real need that will never be solved. No one is in favor of busing. Minority community is not, the white community is not. The real answer lies in the housing, and that's why the Mount Laurel Doctrine is so significant. And now the question is, can we get the public to buy this? And I'll finish by saying that when we built the Ethel Lawrence development, I remember driving Ethel to the site that we bought, 62 acres, and she had just developed cancer, and she passed away within 4 months. I drove her to the site. We pulled up on the property. I said, Ethel, I got a commitment to you. No matter what happens, we're going to do this development. We did it. We have 140 townhouses there. We have a management, maintenance, and corporate headquarters there. And we named it in her honor, which I felt was really appropriate. And we also were faced, I should last say, that when we went to the planning board, and this is after years and years that I've just outlined, we went to the planning board in 1997. The hearing was at the municipal building, which houses about 100 people. About 600 people showed up, and we had to move it to the Harrington School, to the main auditorium, the middle school. The hearing went on for 3 different nights, and we were successful because they were under a lot of court pressure to approve the development, which was multifamily townhouses. And those meetings were unbelievable. And the commentary after all this time was, number 1, this will raise our property tax. Number 2, this will destroy our schools. Number 3, our children, and particularly our daughters, will be raped. The crime will go up. I mean, if you want to really get down to a rawness, come to one of those hearings in those days when we were presenting the plans. The NAACP backed us completely, and we were successful. 10 years after we built the development, I contacted Professor Massey at Princeton, one of the nation's leading experts on racial issues. I said, we need a study of Ethel Lawrence development 10 years later to see if all of those allegations that were made in 1997 in an effort to stop the project, did they ever materialize? He did a 2-year study, wrote a book called Climbing Mount Laurel, and not one of those issues, not one, ever surfaced in the Mount Laurel community. And now we have we're on the verge of having support from the community and from the township council, which is a total turnaround. And it just tells you how long social justice takes to achieve. And we're not totally there yet, but at least we've opened the door and we have a product and we have commitments for more housing. So it's been a long effort. The keys were Ethel Lawrence. The keys were the NAACP. And lastly, the New Jersey Supreme Court holding together on unanimous decisions on this issue. So that's a quick, brief summary of 50 years of work. So thank you for letting me go on and lay that out. But now it's the time to rally the community, exactly what you're doing here. And for the NAACP, not to be so concerned about the litigation, but now to get on the ground in the community and to let the people know who are the beneficiaries. Think of it, there'll be over a couple of 100,000 people benefiting directly, and they, I don't believe, know this history, know why they're there, and they should be not made knowledgeable, and they should be players and supporters of this in the school systems and in the community. So it's an honor to be here. Thank you for letting me speak so long. And I apologize to Marcus and Crystal for taking their time, but thank you very much.
Wow. That was an amazing 20 minutes. I don't know what to say. Peter, I was expecting like a simple answer, but I didn't know that much history was out there. Cause I figured like there was a lost history behind like the folks who actually organized to make this thing happen. But the history about the opposition, like, sheesh. Marcus, Crystal, I don't know what you guys could say. I'll just ask you, like, why do you think this case happened in 1971, and specifically about Ethel Lawrence and her community not having like the wealth necessary to just buy all these single family homes and not try to organize for affordable homes for the community? So I'll ask that question.
Well, first, let me just say this. I'm so appreciative of this event tonight, and I'm so thankful that Peter was available. When we had, just full disclosure, we had our production meeting, I advocated for Peter to go as long as necessary so that we can get this history, because we're at a deficit today because people don't have they don't have history. They don't know the origins. So that's why a lot of people don't have an investment, because they don't know the origins. They don't know what it took to get to a certain place, and they don't really have a grasp on what it's going to take it to the next step. So I, on behalf of the Southern Burlington County NAACP, would like to thank Peter and everyone involved for the commitment to seeing this through. You could have given up a long time ago. And in your description just now, you explained many times where there are many roadblocks that continue to come, but you guys stayed focused and you had a commitment to Ethel Lawrence and to the community. So we appreciate you. And we're hoping that everyone who's watching understands the commitment that it takes to make progress. You can't come in here into any space and expect, just because you did something, that there's going to be an automatic result and things are going to go your favor. Chances are you're going to have to fail a lot until you see progress. And this is why it was important for me to get on this call, to get on this podcast tonight, because I legitimately want to give flowers to the people who put in the work. I'm the new president. There's things that I haven't even had to deal with. There's a lot that we're doing in terms of housing, and we're doing a lot of work from our branch, and I'll get to that. But the history, that's Peter. The history, that's Crystal, who was the president for 6 years. She had to go to hearings. I haven't had to go to hearings. She had to go to those hearings to get to this point. So I would like to take a second and step back and allow and give Crystal her flowers, because while she was doing all that work, there were no podcasts speaking about this. So I would like to give her flowers and thank her for the work that she's put in. And I would like to take a step back and let her answer this question, if you don't mind, Ellen.
That's great. Crystal, let us know.
Thank you so much. I have to tell you, when I came aboard, I was really fortunate because Peter invited me into Ethel Lawrence Homes, and we sat, and he took his time to give me everything that you all got tonight, right? And I was immediately blown away by not only the ugliness of the history, but I was also, elated to know that there are Peters out there, right? Or Peter himself is out there still holding up the bloodstained banner, fighting for, equity in housing. People just don't even understand, the significance of housing when you look at all the other racial barriers that we're up against. As Peter mentioned, we're the fifth most segregated state when it comes to our education system. All those things matter. And so, it's really an honor and a privilege to be on this podcast, sitting with the legend himself. And one of the things I've always told people about, and this is just kind of a little sidebar, but about Peter as Peter's character and his commitment. Obviously, the history itself lets you know he's been committed to this for 50 years, right? But when I look at, where his heart is on this, I remember when Peter and I went on a tour of Ethel Lawrence Homes. And number one, they're beautiful. So let me just say that. It's a very beautiful property. And I remember we were walking across the grounds and there was an ice pop wrapper on the ground. And Peter didn't think twice before he stopped to pick it up to make sure that there is a sense of pride in keeping Ethel Lawrence as beautiful as it could be. And to me, that says a lot, because a lot of times when people are at the top and they're responsible for such huge victories, those are the small things that you see people get away from, but not Peter. He's very much invested in Ethel Lawrence Homes from inception to where we're at today. And going to court, I just want to speak on that. I would take time off from work to go and sit in some of these hearings. And I may not have firsthand experienced some of the ugliness of those meetings that Peter just referred to, but some of the stuff that would come up in the hearings wasn't that far from it. The ideology of those very ugly meetings that Peter referred to are certainly written within the opposition from these various towns that were still trying to fight coming in and actually building the affordable housing. And I mean, literally, I attended the hearings, not just because it was important to do as the president of the branch at the time, but quite honestly, I learned so much, one from Peter and Kevin, but also learning about the true New Jersey of today, right? Which still really includes some really heinous and pervasive thoughts about Black people and people of color when it comes to being their neighbor. This everything we're talking about is not ancient history. None of it's ancient history. And unfortunately, there are those who are still out there, still in your legislatures, right? Who are still walking those halls, still trying to set us all back. And so when I think about Ethel Lawrence and her reason, first of all, I had the opportunity to read the book Climbing Mount Laurel. And one of the things I always stood out when I thought about the history and the significance, she got in the fight because, as Peter said, she was a sixth generation Mount Laurel resident, and she knew that based on the different issues with the zoning and how they were condemning the different properties to make sure that it was deemed inhabitable for people who look like us, right? She did that to fight for the generations to come behind her to have that opportunity, and that's something that's like so intricate to social justice, because Peter's been in this for 50 years. before you can see some of these things come to fruition, right? So, what it taught me, I learned so much, not only again like about just the ugly truths about New Jersey and the racial divide, but one of the things it taught me as an activist is that this has to be a long haul undertaking, because anything like Peter said that's rooted in racial divide or racial like grounded in racial disparities, it's going to take a long time. So I just always thank Peter. It's an honor to give him his flowers while we're all still here. And I also will say about Peter, when I came into office and when I got the invitation to come walk the grounds, Peter sent me flowers. And so, that is, to me, it just says a lot about the person, the litigator, the champion of this work. And so I won't continue to go on because like I said, 6 years, I had an opportunity to learn so much, but I'm thankful for all the work that Fair Share has done on both sides, from the litigation to the development. And I certainly understand what Peter is saying when he says that we have to turn our attention to getting the folks into these houses, because there's always the plan to undermine that process as well. And then all the work that Peter and his team have done over the years, it can become for naught. And that too was unfair. So we really have to do our part to make sure that people are paying attention to the notices and that they're getting into these units when they become available, really before they officially become available.
And Element, if can I make a really quick point to
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, so and I apologize, everyone can see me looking down. My branch meeting is going on right now. So I've been interjecting here and there, but I bring that up because there's a vision of what activism is. So people, a lot of times they think the person who's on the podium, that's the definition of an activist. And it's like, there's so many different variations of what activism is, and it's a puzzle. So right now on my committee, my vice president and my second vice president are running the meeting right now, and I can do this because we're a team. We all can play a role, and that's the piece I always try to get across when it comes to activism, because the things that Peter did made it possible for the things that Crystal did. Now the thing that Crystal did paved the way for the things that I'm doing, and things I'm doing going to pave way for my successor, and all of that comes together. So we have to get more people involved in this fight. So when we're speaking about educating people about these new notices, that means you don't have to be a member of the NAACP. You don't have to work for Fair Share. If you're a member of the community and you see a Facebook ad saying these units have opened up in your town, sharing that information makes you an activist. You don't have to be a part of an organization to help out with this work. So it's like we have to be more creative with how we get information out to the people. That's the first thing. We have to really reinvent the wheel with how we get these works that Ellerm is doing currently, compiling that information about when different cities are having units available. So we have to recreate the wheel of how we get that information out. But to me, the more important piece of that is getting the entire community invested and understanding that affects all of us. Historically, we have been kept away from home ownership. We have been kept away from any capacities that can build equity. So these are historically systematic racism that has been happening in our community. More specifically on deeds in many towns. On your deed of your property, they would say you cannot sell to a black person. And that was a federally mandated thing that went on to, and right here in Burlington County, Willingboro, as close as Willingboro, were towns where it was on the deed. Why? Because the government and the powers that be realize that when you have someone give them an opportunity to build equity, and the self-esteem that comes from ownership. They do everything in their power to block Black people specifically from having that feeling of ownership because we were owned. Like, people have to realize why it is always a concerted effort to block ownership. So this is when Peter was speaking about all those roadblocks and people meeting to find these loopholes. It wasn't only because they didn't want these affordable things coming to their town. It was because this would empower a group of people that this country was built upon exploiting. And we have to be very honest and intentional about the origins of things. So that's why it's important for us, everyone who's on this podcast, who's viewing, to realize that you don't have to be a member of the NAACP to take the Mount Laurel decision seriously. You can share the information, you can contact people. We have to be at the forefront of getting this information out, because as Elam can tell you, when we don't apply, people don't like us apply for us. Like, when we don't apply, the placements just don't sit. They go to another person. So people who don't need that assistance are getting are reaping the benefits that weren't designed for them. So we have to do more on our part to make sure that we get this stuff into the hands, this information, the training, we get into the hands of the people who historically have been deprived of it. So I implore everyone who's paying attention to please like the Facebook page of Fair Share Housing so you can be aware. Make sure you be in contact so you can get on their mailing list. Let's stay informed so we can share this information, because we cannot complain about information that is out there. We have to actively get information out, because it is our responsibility to obtain the information that's out there, because they don't want us to get it. That's the other piece of the puzzle. They don't want us to know that these things are available. So go ahead, Crystal.
I am so sorry. I don't want to interrupt. I just want to thank you all for having me on. I have to bid you adieu. I do have another commitment. I have a New Jersey State Conference Executive Committee meeting that's taking place right now. I'm the second vice president of the state conference. So this is a family business, and we're all family here. And, you know, one of the things that happens in social justice, the commitment, you know, yields relationships that become very much family. And so, again, I just want to thank Peter for all of his work, for sharing that rich history. It's important that people know what actually happened, right? So, Elam, thank you for having this tonight, having me crash the party, so to speak. And, you know, I thank Marcus for his, you know, taking up the mantle and carrying it on to the next level. And so I just want to say goodnight and talk with you all soon.
Ready? Crystal, so much for doing it. And I think we got to do a part 2 of this conversation, because in the spirit of my Lord, we got to do podcast number 2. So thank you so much, Crystal. And, you know, we'll try again. We'll try again next month. Hopefully we can make it. But before we try to wrap up the rest of the conversation, I do want to share a couple communities out there who we're taking great steps right now. It's taking a lot of work to get us to a point where there are units out there, developments out there getting built, giving people great opportunity to live in great communities and do a lot of great work. So real quickly, I'll share a couple opportunities. There's an opportunity right now in West Windsor, Woodmont Way, that's the name of the development, in Mercer County. That's 89 inclusionary rental apartments. Application deadline real soon, May 31st. So for folks out there who are looking for a place in West Windsor in a beautiful community, that's one opportunity right there. There's Northport in Seabright, Monmouth County. That's four inclusionary for sale condos. Application deadline also May 31st. So that's a home ownership opportunity out there. And last one I'll share, it's the Grove in Upper Saddle River, Bergen County, 22 inclusionary for sale condos. So another home ownership opportunity. And deadline for that one is June 3rd. So for the folks out there who are interested in supporting our work and reaching out to us, I'll just say email us at allabouthousing@fairsharehousing.org. We'll get you all the information you need. We'll help you put a plan together to help Black communities, to help low-income communities who historically been denied great access to the opportunity to home ownership, get access to these opportunities and continue the struggle. So, Peter, wow, I don't even know if I should ask you another question because, that was just a powerful history lesson. I guess I gotta ask our standard question. So Marcus, I'll start with you. For the folks out there who know, the last couple months we've been doing this podcast, and the main thing we want to establish is that the work of the civil rights movement is not over. The check never came. The guaranteed jobs of freedom didn't come either. And we learned last week with our conversation with my coworker James that our state is yet to take the steps necessary to actually heal the wound. And today we just heard about the history, the opposition, the amount of effort they put into just denying people access to a home in a great neighborhood. I've got to ask this question, Marcus. I'll start with you. MLK in '68 said we're coming to get our check. So what does that mean to you, and what are you doing to make it happen? What are you doing to help the people get paid?
Well, the first thing I would invite everyone, after you go to Fair Share Housing Center on Facebook and like their page, I encourage you to go to Southern Burlington County NACP page and like our page as well. When you go to our page, our background image, as I'm looking at it right now, says we are coming for everything our ancestors were denied. That is our background image. That is what we're about. We understood that all the work that our ancestors put in, we were never able to reap the benefits of it. We weren't able to reap the benefits of their work. People joke about that 40 acres and a meal, but that was a real thing. Like being denied those 40 acres was a big deal. That's equity, it's ownership, it's empowerment, it's self-esteem, it's worth. We're coming for our check is a real statement from the latter Dr. King, my favorite Dr. King, latter in his life, when he started taking a lot more progressive stances, and he understood that we needed to come together. But with coming together, we weren't dreaming anymore. We were demanding, and that's the point where we have to get to in order to get anything. And this is the most important piece for a Black person in this country. Anything you want, you have to demand it, because nothing is going to be given freely. Nothing. You have to demand your civil rights. You have to demand your equity. You have to demand the opportunities to compete. You have to make the demands, because the country was built on our exploitation. We have to remember that every fabric of the society was built on exploiting Black people, exploiting Black labor, exploiting Black excellence. How many different musicians and creators and inventors didn't invent or sing a thing, but just took a Black person's work and put their name on it? So this is the history of our country. So today, and this is my rallying cry, today, make sure you hold people accountable. Make sure the people who are supposed to represent you, they are actually representing you. We have bills, we have galore. We have bills galore in New Jersey, but we don't have many laws. We don't have many laws that actually impact the day-to-day life of your Black residents and your brown residents and your poor residents. So our job, your job, my job, our job is to stay in contact with our elected officials and make sure that they're pushing every single bill and making them come a law, because people aren't just going to be nice to us. It has to be legislated. Expecting people to work based on their conscience hasn't gotten us very far. Expecting people to do the right thing hasn't gotten us very far. I have heard the recordings from different townships when they were discussing the fair share housing coming to the town. You want to hear hate? You want to hear divisiveness? You want to hear disrespect? Listen to the audio or read the transcripts from fair share housing meetings. It's deplorable. So we can't expect people to do the right thing. We just have to demand the people who represent us to do the right thing. And with that, I'll say it is an honor to be in this work. I'm honored to be around all the different people who take this work seriously. We have a lot of sellouts. We have a lot. And to my sellouts out there, it's never too late to right the ship. Whatever your decision was to not fight for the people, as long as you have breath, you can make a change and start fighting for the people. So I hope we understand how serious housing is. Housing is the quintessential element of freedom. Housing, having access to affordable housing and having access to gain wealth and equity is a quintessential element of freedom and progress. And we need more people to get in on this fight. So power to the people.
Marcus, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Peter, I'll give you a chance to have us close this off. 68 is not 68, 71 is just 3 years. And King lost his life in 68. So I just want to give you a chance to reflect on that statement in 68 that we're coming to get our check, as part of the Poor People's Campaign. What does that mean to you, and what do you think we have to work on to actually get to a point where we achieve that goal?
Well, first, thanks for permitting me to be on this effort here with you. I also want to tell you what an honor it is to have worked with all the attorneys that have been involved, particularly Carl Biscayne and Ken Miser, who were with Legal Services. Carl, I would say, is the architect of the doctrine from a legal perspective. And I was fortunate to work with him back in those days. The thing I would like to emphasize in closing is that I don't see the Mount Laurel doctrine as a legal doctrine. I see this work as a moral issue. And the question is whether we have the character and we have the fidelity and the concern about our fellow man to implement all aspects of an equitable life. The housing is one piece of it. It's the piece that puts you in a community that maybe you can benefit from. But this is really a question of morality, and it needs to be seen through those glasses. The legal thing is one framework, but the real framework, even if you're on the Supreme Court, this is a simple doctrine, which is fairness to all. It's not that complicated to use the state's powers in a way that benefits everyone in an equitable way. So the reason that these judges got behind this is because we were able to present the great disparity, the inequality, the exclusion, and coupled with the fact that each of them lives in the suburbs, and they know over the last 50 years what's been going on. Their neighbors have these attitudes. They know what the issues are. The legalities were easy, but they were supported by knowing the moral breakdown. And that's really the key that we need to push. I think if King were present today, he would be pushing jobs and he would be pushing housing and economics, but he really would couch it in a moral, casing. And that's what I think NAACP, the Fair Share Center, all these groups need to reach out. Why aren't these suburban churches more active when the people are in their communities? In the early days, they really wouldn't get involved because of pure fear that the parishioners would not support the churches. Now that we're here, it's a different story, and we need to present that picture. And the best way to do it is to show who has benefited and what the real scope of benefit can be with the people that are there. We have a young lady at Ethel Lawrence who is just graduating with honors from Notre Dame as we speak. She spent last semester in Israel on an exchange program. We have other students going to college, some going to Rutgers, and we need to encourage those, but we need to tell those stories. And we need those people in the community to know, just like the book Climbing Mount Laurel says, not one of their racial allegations in 1997 ever materialized. And so I think we need to present a positive picture, a picture of morality to challenge the churches and challenge these communities. And we need to work, all of us, together. So, amen. Thank you very much, and good night.
Good night. Thank you so much, Peter. Thank you, Marcus. And for all the folks out there, thank you for tuning into our program once more. I can't make any promises, but we'll try to do part 2 next month. We'll try to pick up the conversation again, because I think we got to talk about this morality part. So, Peter, Marcus, thank you for being on. And to all the folks out there, stay safe and take care.